Community Beacon, Fridays at 6:30 EST, with your hosts Michael Seville and Joel Simmons. A channel whose focus is liberty. A place where the lessons discussed and taught will create openings to a more open and freer mindset. A mindset where you may reach the height of your potential and excel. Here are your hosts, Mike and Joel.
The one and only, the one and only. What is going on, brother?
Hey man, good to see you back in the land of they call it the United States. Back in the land of the United States.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. I'm telling you, it's beautiful. It was beautiful where I was at. It's beautiful when I landed back here, and so I'm excited to get back with you. Last week we kind of ended with some technical difficulties, but man, that was an awesome show that we had, and I'm sure
Yes.
this today will not disappoint, guys. I am Michael Seville. On
The
the other
real
side of
estate king. All hail the real estate king. Long live the king. Long live the king.
I appreciate you, brother. And of course, on the other side of the screen is my co-host, the brother from another mother, Mr. Joel Simmons of the Tenacity Foundation. Man, it's good to be back.
Yes.
It's
Good to
good to
have you
be
back.
back. It's good to be back. Guys, remember on our shows and what we need you all to do. Hold on, let me see if I can get this going. And I got my dog. He needs some attention right now. I'm telling you, I think, and we the brother and I have to compare notes one day, but I say I have the neediest. I have like one of the neediest dogs in the world, and the brother said he has the most neediest dog in the world. But I don't know. Chalky is up underneath me, man. He's like one of those little brothers that you just can't, just get away from me.
Gosh, man, you didn't call my dog all the way from downstairs.
Oh, he heard it.
Yeah,
He
he
said
came from upstairs all the way downstairs and walked straight up to me.
he said this is a competition. I'm here. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
It's Timmy.
There you
Yeah.
go. There's a
Man, I
snout
can't.
for you.
I wish I could lift this dog up, but he's all up. He's about 140 pounds, and I
Nah.
don't even want to get him started right now. Guys, remember to like, share, comment, hit the notification bell. I'm gonna tell you what's the most interesting thing. A couple interesting things happened to me. Um, and it just happened right now. So it's like I almost feel like the Lord is telling me to talk about this. It's like a download because when I was in Jamaica, like some of the most interesting coincidences happened.
Mm.
We were driving down a long country road where I was actually kind of where I grew up in, and I was telling my father as he was driving, I said, man, that used to be Ashley, this guy named Ashley Brooks. That was Ashley Brooks' shop. Now I don't know how it is in America, but I know in Jamaica there's certain shops that you weren't allowed to go to. Like they say, you can't go to that shop. You got to go to another shop, which is like further along down the road. And so Ashley Brooks' shop was one of those shops. And I remember Ashley Brooks had like this bull. It was a black bull, and the eyes were like red. And whenever you walked past his gate, that bull would just, as at least as a kid, it seemed like he was staring at me.
Mm.
And so when we were driving down, I was telling my father about it, and I was like, man, I don't even remember where his shop was. I'm trying because now that you go back, everything seems smaller than what it was. It doesn't seem quite as large as when you were kids. And so we picked up my aunt, and she was in the car. And then, my dad pointed at the house. He was like, "Was that the house?" And I was like, "No, that's not the house. It was before it was before we came up here. We already passed it." And my aunt said, "What house?" And I said, "Ashley Brooks' shop, or the house that we passed by." Oh, that's his grandson right there. I mean, as soon as I said it, like we passed his grandson driving down the road, and I'm like, man, that's a coincidence. I said, okay.
Mm.
So we go. It was a funeral. I was two funerals that I attended. So as I was going to the funeral, I was going to do the remembrance/eulogy. That's what they had me speak for my cousin. And there was one thing that was going on in my mind, and it was a verse. Well, I believe it was Samuel when God was calling him, and he kept saying, "Here I am, Lord, here I am." Right. And as we were driving there, I kept saying, like, I don't know if I'm going to say this. It just came to me that morning. I don't know if I'm going to say this verse. Of course, we were late in Jamaican fashion. We get to the funeral. As I get out the car, the song I'm hearing is "Here I Am, Here I Am." So it's like, okay, now I have to say the song. Excuse me. I have to say, talk about the scripture verse that I was reading earlier that morning. So that was that. The next day, we go to my uncle's funeral, and every morning I read a verse, I read a chapter out of the Bible. And so it just so happened to be that it was Second Corinthians, I think it was either chapter 14 or 15 was what I read that morning. As I'm sitting there just contemplating about what I'm going to say during my uncle's eulogy, well, I had already written some notes. My cousin goes up there and he reads from that same scripture. I mean, it's just like these things happen. So, brother, as we got on this call, I say all that to say this, and I go to let the dog back in because I said, "Oh, my dog is giving issues," and the brother and I were deciding on what we were going to talk about. I said, man, I think we should talk about making room. Let's make room. Like about making room. And of course, we go to record, and I hadn't told the brother this, and I said, brother, we got to make room on this app because we've ran out of space. And you started making it app, and I wrote down, I said, isn't that something about this comes to mind of making room, and all of a sudden here we are about to record. We can't start the recording because we have to make room on this on the app, this StreamYard app that we're using. I'm thinking like, you know what? This is the perfect thing to talk about. We spoke about abundance earlier. That was part of the conversation that we had before we came onto this recording. And I'm like, yeah, we always can create and we can always make abundance, but and at the same time, there's some things that we have that's stopping us from doing it. And we're not making room for it. We're not making room for some of the newer things that we have in store and in life. There's some things that we haven't used, we don't plan on using. There's some things that don't serve us anymore, and we continue to keep them, and we're not allowing room for the newness. So that might be actual materialistic things. I would even say that that is just a um it's an example of the materialistic things, but it's also what we have going on the inside. We refuse to let things go that we have going on, which I think, like I said, limited beliefs. And then all of a sudden, we start to see this just happen in our lives. We start to accumulate things, people, etc., that don't serve us. What do you think about that topic for today, brother?
And I think that I like it, making room.
Making room.
Um, and and man, you delivered that so eloquently. That was beautiful. The story that led up to it, to hear, here am I. I was looking at that in Samuel, the third chapter,
Yeah.
First Samuel, third chapter, and I was just reading that while you were talking, and I got down there to that, and the Lord called yet again Samuel, and Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, "Here am I," and that's powerful because, like, with Samuel, he was set out and prepared for this great work. And he was set out and prepared for this great work before he even had an opportunity to know what great work he was set out and prepared for. And that means so much inside of my heart. It's because it's like, God spoke to Jeremiah and he said, before you were born, I knew thee.
Mm-hmm.
In the womb of your mother, I knew thee. And I had already set forth and adorned you to be, a prophet. I already set you apart. You were already separated to be, something so great. And now it's like I'm hearing this conversation and you're talking about going and speaking, which you all don't know. Mike can speak extremely well. And he has a very spiritual side to him, too, that in the given moment, he speaks not just from the heart, but he speaks spiritually. He speaks from God. And I got an opportunity to witness this. Um, the unfortunate piece of it was that I noticed it shows up when he is at a funeral. But he has this power that comes in these given moments where he goes to a much, much higher level. And I think that that is really important, especially when we start talking about making room and we start talking about abundance. Because um, when you think about God, it's like, as far as my belief goes, God is abundant. He is the abundance. There is nothing beyond him. You can't go over him because he's too high. You can't go beneath him because he's too low. You can't go around him because he's too wide. And as the old preacher would say, you must go in through the door, you know. And it's just like, so this is the abundance. You never have to worry about running out. Even Jesus told the woman by the well, and in the book of Saint John, I think it was 3:24, or maybe 4:24. But he speaks to her in the sense. He says, "If you had asked me for water, if you had asked me for water, then then you would have had rivers of water flowing up and out of you." That might have been 22nd verse, but it's about that abundance. It's like, I have so much that you'll never run thirsty. You have just enough because you're looking at it naturally. You're looking at it as something that is tangible. You're
Mm-hmm.
looking at it as something that you have to go out and collect. You have to forage for. You have to work for. The essence of time is against you.
Yep.
All of these things, but in me is infinite.
Yep.
And so I'm hearing that when it's like saying, "Here am I," and that's when I recognize this as I'm speaking to you, Mike. And it's like Samuel kept rising. It was the third
Mm-hmm.
time before he realized that it was God speaking to him. But two times he went the old pathway.
Yep.
And I feel like that's what we as people, this is what we do. And the reason why we're not able to reach the level of our successes, the level of our relationships, the level of our God-given gift, the level of whatever it is that we are meant and designed to do, is because when we hear the opportunity lay upon our ear, or even more so in our heart or in our mind, to be most specific, when we feel it in our spirit, the first thing we do is go back to the old pathway to find out what we need to do and how we need to do it. The only thing you can find out from the old pathway is that it's not the right pathway.
I wish the brother would stop speaking my eulogy right now. He wasn't, and the brother wasn't even there. I'm gonna speak on it, man. What a beautiful woman that passed away. Cousin, I call her. She was like my sister mom, because we kind of were raised together, and I gave that lady trouble. I gave that young lady trouble as she came back from Jamaica. But all she did was show me a lot of love, a lot of encouragement. Of course, she got upset with me because she's only human, and I was always poking and prodding at her. But there, it ended up we had an awesome relationship. Um, and so I remember I went to her remembrance, brother, and they kept on saying her full name. They kept on saying Carol Diane Panton. She had been married. Carol Diane Panton. Carol Diane Panton. I heard a lot of that the night before at the remembrance service in Spanish Town. And so when I got up there, I said, and this is the same thing you just mentioned, brother. I said, I know you all knew her as Carol Diane Panton. Like I heard that name a lot. And this was the godly woman, the woman who sang, spirit wrote a bunch of different songs, etc. Like she, in the church, she was the first lady, etc. I said, but I came initially, I knew her as Mai. That's what we used to call her when I was a kid, Mai. And so I spoke a little bit about that, and then she went into what some people call secular. I call it reggae music, and she did that for a while. But the entire time she was doing it, it was a call she was hearing, because even though she was in these different things, she was still coming from a spiritual way. And every time she, I mean, I can remember the first song she sang that I was involved in with the studio, and she said, "Children." She was talking about how children are our future, etc. It wasn't that song, but it was a song similar to it. I'm not even gonna, I'm not gonna spoil our viewers with my great voice, but she spoke about that. But then it was like the first time she did it, the second time she did it, and the third time she did it for God. And I was like, man, it
Mm.
just the way that Samuel, the story went was very similar to her life. And I would think, I'm making the assumption that it's that way for a lot of us. Like you mentioned, brother, like we hear it and we want to go back to the way of our knowing, the natural way. He went back to Eli. He went to Eli and said, "Are you calling me?" You know, and Eli said, "Nah, brother. No, I'm not. Go back to bed." And it wasn't until the third time Eli said, when gave him the command, told him to listen. Next time you hear your name, say this. Once Eli realized it, so it was almost like
Mm.
he had to be nudged. Eli had to give him somewhat of a testimony to say, "Listen, next time you hear it, this is what you should call out for." And I think I love this. Heck, this is community beacon all within itself. Like this is what you need to look out for, because the Lord is abundant and the Lord is speaking. I'm not. I don't want. I'm not. I'm gonna leave the pastoring to the pastor on the other side of the screen. But the Lord is speaking to us. The Lord is telling us things constantly. Abundance. It just doesn't stop. It's overflowing. It's always happening, and we continuously go back to what we are familiar with, the earthly way of just being familiar. And it takes that time for you to say, to hear a brother like the brother on the other end to kind of nudge you in that way. I remember things that this brother told me years ago that it comes to fruition, that you think later on, just like, oh, this is kind of what the brother was talking about. This, it just comes up every now and then, but it takes that talking or hearing from someone else who's so spiritually inclined to say, okay, well, maybe that is. And tell you what, even with it, because I want to get into the making room. Getting rid of some of our old things that we're used to and we're accustomed to is some of the most mentally draining thing. It's one of the most mental. It could be. I'm not gonna say it is the most, but it's a very mentally draining thing. Like for me personally, when I am getting rid of stuff, when things no longer serve my purpose, I have a million excuses as to why I shouldn't let it go. It's like, oh, maybe I'm gonna need this sometime later on down the line. Maybe this has such sentimental value to me. This is and we come up with all these different excuses. And so when you finally do get rid of it, and I've noticed this, I had to really become aware of this, is that if I go out and say I went into the garage once and I was just getting rid of stuff, and I just say, you know what, forget it, I'm gonna throw it out. It's almost like I'm not gonna do anything for the rest of the day. It's like, because it's just mentally draining, even if it wasn't a lot of physical exertion, mentally somewhere, because I'm getting rid of the old, it comes up. But then I'm gonna tell you what, automatically abundance starts to appear. When you get rid of some of this clutter, when you get rid of some of these things that you've been holding on to, now your hand is open and clear to start to receive. And sometimes we're so clenched onto things is that we're not receiving what's meant for us to receive because we're so attached to the new. What do you think, bro?
Man, I think that you're like firing at all cylinders. That's what I think. I think you're firing at all cylinders. You used a word, familiar. You said we go back to that familiar place, that familiar thought. I, I think that that's really important. When I think about, those scriptures, I think about this. This is what came to my mind. When you said familiar, I thought about Balaam, and you'll find his story in the book of Genesis. Um, Balaam should be around like the 22nd chapter. You'll find it in Genesis. and there's no beginning to him. You don't know about him. And I thought about that. I'm like, Balaam, I said, man, who is this dude? Who is he? Who is Balaam? Because it's saying in these scriptures that God spoke to him. And if you read the Old Testament scriptures, if you read the Torah, you'll find that even in the translations, the way that the translations have come about when it speaks to many words, but in particular God, when there's a capital G versus a lowercase g, it's because it was a different word. For us in our modern day translation, it just means if it's a lowercase, this is the idol God. But when you go back to the Hebrew writing, it's because it was a totally different word. And this is just how it was translated to give us understanding that we're not talking about the sovereign, the almighty, the all-seeing, the omnipresent. We're not talking about him. We're talking about an idol. So if I'm not speaking that idol's name, then this lets you know I'm not speaking about the sovereign. And so when they speak to Balaam, it's a uppercase G. I said, man, what on earth? And I kept researching, and then finally I got to Jeremiah. And Jeremiah, he testifies about Balaam, but he calls him a soothsayer. He doesn't call him a prophet. Now, Moses had depicted the image of who is the prophet and who is not the prophet. And when he gave that depiction, I think it was in the 18th chapter of Deuteronomy, he said, this is how you'll know the difference between the prophet of God and the prophet that is not of God. The one, when he speaks the word, it will come to pass. The other, when he speaks the word, it will not come to pass. If it comes to pass, listen and follow that prophet. If it does not come to pass, do not listen and do not follow that prophet. So it was very clear. He who speaks in the name of God and the works follow afterwards, he is sent from God. He who speaks the word in the name of God and his works do not follow is not from God. So I'm like, okay, I got all these different references inside my mind, and I'm going to get to this word familiar now. A soothsayer can be considered by definition as a prophet or a diviner or a familiar, somebody who is familiar with spirits. It goes down the pathway of a soothsayer, goes down the pathway of I guess, what do we have those people? I don't want to say a tarot reader because it's not specific like that, but you know, like a palmist or some sort like that. There's a different name that I'm missing right now, but it goes down that pathway. It goes down that pathway. And so there's a thin line in between it, but I don't want to explore that right now. So familiar is the terminology that you utilize. And then I thought about Balaam, and it's like, what did Balaam do? He got the word from God. And then he acted on it. Then he was questioned again. He got the word from God. Then he did not act on it, but only did a portion of it. God said, if they return and call your name, then rise up and go with them, but only speak what I say. He just rose up in the morning and went with them. So he did not wait for them to call his name. God got angry. He got upset. He said, sent the angel down there, and while Balaam and his two servants are riding on a donkey, and the Bible calls it an ass, and that's very important. Riding on the ass, they're riding, and the donkey looks up and sees the angel with his sword drawn, so he goes a different way, and Balaam hits the donkey. Pow! And then the donkey kind of like, he's trying to get him back into the way, but he doesn't go into the way. Sometimes the reason why we can't get back into the way is because we're so disobedient. We're going in such the wrong direction. We cannot get into the way because God is trying to tell you something. He's trying to tell us something. He's trying to tell us, make room. You don't know what you're doing. So he ends up going into a more narrow path. And in this narrow path, the angel shows up again. And he's like, get into the way. And the donkey's like, I ain't doing it. So he hits him again. Bow! And he crushes his foot. He's like, man, I'm so sick and tired of this. So then what ends up happening is the donkey, instead of going into the way, he goes from a more narrow way to a very narrow way. So things are closing in. And what happens is Balaam's like, man, you got to stop. So he's telling the donkey, get back, stop going this way. And the donkey sees the angel and he just lays down. And Balaam lands and everything. And he gets up and he hits him with his staff. And that's when God opens up the mouth of the ass. And that's why it's so important, because it's like a double meaning. Ass means, the donkey, but it also, sometimes we use that terminology, just say you're making a fool out of yourself. He used the mouth of the fool. It's another way of thinking. He used the mouth of the fool to say, what have I done to you all these years in my life that you should hit me?
Yeah.
Everything you ever asked me to do, I've done it. And that's when God opens the eyes of Balaam and he sees the angel. So it's like sometimes we cannot operate inside of our abundance because we are steadily following the pathway of an ass. We are being foolish. We are being foolish to the point where the fools are actually more wise than we are. And why? It's because our stubbornness causes us to just seek after familiar things. You can never become what you desire to be by being what you used to be.
Can't.
And that's what came to my mind when you started talking about familiar, was this is a perfect example of a person who continued to seek out his familiar, his old ways, the ways that he knew of, rather than put his trust in God.
So let's continue down this path. I think we're going somewhere. No, I don't think. I know we're going somewhere with this. And what came to mind as well was like why? Like, why is it so hard to move away from the familiar? Right? Like you just mentioned, brother, we can't get to where we're going by doing the same things that we've always done. And for those of us who have this awareness, which it seems to be a lot of people, I think a lot of people's eyes are open and like, listen, we've been doing this for quite some time now, and we're still in the same position. We're still operating out of an old program. Why is it so hard for us to move away? I've been reading this book, a couple of books. This author comes out. His name is Charles Whitfield, and he's actually a substance abuse therapist. He was a therapist. I think he's a psychologist, to be honest with you. And he wrote a couple books. One book was Boundaries and Relationships, and the other one was called Healing the Child Within. If anybody is into coaching, if you're into pastoring, if you're into any kind of thing that has to do with working with other people, it's an awesome book to check out. But one of the key themes to it is codependency. And one of the things that we can often do is we often are, and it was a huge paradigm shift for me, because we talk about this victim mentality, and I had to turn around and say, okay, so what part do I play in this so-called quote unquote dysfunction? And we do play a part, because my part in playing in this dysfunction is almost like a savior mentality. This is with that savior mentality, a part of that kind of shifts is called survivor's guilt. It's like, I've reached this point and I don't want, we hear the saying, no man left behind. We want to go back. We want to help everyone. We want to save everyone. So we kind of I would kind of get caught up in this pattern of going so far and then turning around and going back trying to grab somebody. And that person you're trying to grab is kicking and screaming because they don't want to go. They are where they want to be. But this was something that was just on my mind. Oh, I gotta help out. I gotta turn around. I gotta help out, without necessarily getting to a point to where you really can help out. So that's a part of, like, not wanting to leave these things, whether it's a person, place, or thing, behind, because now you're becoming something new. You're stepping into something greater. However, because we are attached to these things, here we go. Now it goes into attachment. We're so attached to these things, and we're so attached to the outcome that we want to see happen. You tell the story of Balaam, and he had an ideal in his mind of where he was supposed to go and how he was supposed to go there and how he was supposed to get there. And because he couldn't, he was so stuck in his own thought process of how it was supposed to happen, he couldn't see that this donkey was trying to alert him to something. So it's like we're not open to a lot of these different things. We're not open to it because we're so attached to these things. Labels, a lot of this comes down to labels as well. And I don't want to go this far into with this episode. I think we've dropped a lot of heavy things onto someone. But we have to take a look at our attachments of how we want things to be done, or how we saw it done by somebody else, and we have to follow this path, but their path is not our path. Right?
Right. I agree. I agree. I agree. You know, I know you said labels, and I don't want to use a label, but the word that came to my mind while you were looking for a word was, and then you said labels, was lies.
Mm,
That's what came to me.
yeah.
Lies. And it's like the story that we tell ourselves. I would, there's been controversy. I was on a show. I'm sorry, but I can't remember the lady's name that interviewed me on this one occasion. Maybe that's a good thing. But I told her, she said, "Is there anything that you would like to leave?" You can find it on my channel. But she said, "Is there anything that you want to leave?" And I said, "Yes, I'll leave this one statement. This is something that I've always taught my children. I don't taught people, and it's a controversial statement. So you all will probably find that it's controversial now, whether you're looking at this in the year 2024 or in the year 2030. You still may find it controversial, but I would tell them, and have told them, and have told many people. I said, never lie to yourself because you might believe it. Never lie to God, because who can save you? He's the only one who can save you. So never lie to God." And this statement is absent of don't lie to everybody. And that's the thing people get hung up on. They're like, "Oh, well, you shouldn't lie." And I say, well, I'm not saying that you should lie. I'm saying these are two things that you should never do. You should never lie to God. Why? Because he is the only one who could save you. So you need to be truthful and honest with him. Because at the end of the day, when you're sitting there praying and you're asking for deliverance, and he's like, "Well, hold on, man."
Wait a minute.
The little boy can only cry wolf for so many times. I'm all seeing. I know what you did last night. You know what I mean? And you need to be seeking for mercy, for forgiveness, for repentance, but you're lying the entire time. You're not going to repent. You're not going to change your ways. You're not going to do anything else. You just want to escape simply because you want to escape. And now you're coming to him because there's nobody else who's worked it out for you. So you're just like, you know what? Well, I prayed to God and nothing happened. Well, yeah, it's because you're lying. That's why. That's why. Even in your repenting, you've been lying too. That's why. And then don't lie to yourself, because at some point in time, you'll start to believe your own lie, and it is going to send you down a pathway that you don't want to be down. And so, so you're talking these words, and so I'm gonna give you another scripture. It's in the Second Thessalonians. I'm gonna read it, 2nd chapter, and I was looking for this, and I'll read a couple of verses. Verse 10: and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth. And I want to stop for one moment. Truth is something that is always true. It doesn't need you. It doesn't need me. It doesn't need politics. It doesn't need anything, because it's true. It stands on its own. It doesn't need anybody to justify it. So when we say, when we talk, when you hear the scripture, no, it's not the same thing as being honest. It's not the same thing as what's the word I'm looking for? Being honest when nobody's looking.
Integrity.
It's not the same thing as integrity. It's not it's not the same thing as being true. Truth stands alone. If you want to hear more about that, I think that there's a man by the name of Myron Golden who really paints a very good picture of that they might be saved. So truth has the power of saving. One scripture says, if you continue in my words, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And many times people will say set, but it's make. So there's no need for you to do anything. You don't have to do anything. It simply releases the bondage. So now we talk about Balaam, and we're like, why would he not go another way? It's like his old familiar pathway.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lie inside of his mind that he believed so much that when truth arrived at his doorstep, he would not believe it, because his lie was much more important. He trusted in his lie. Let me give you the end of this, and I want to hear what you got to say, Mike. Verse 11. And for this cause, God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. You've gone to the point. I've always said this. If you go and lie, never lie to yourself and never lie to God. If you lie to God, if you just decide you don't want to believe the truth, God will send you a strong delusion that you will believe a lie. That lie that you've been telling, you'll start to believe it. You'll start to believe it. You're going to start telling other people about it. You're going to start putting it on the mountaintop, this lie. And here's the last scripture. That they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but have pleasure in unrighteousness. And this is the end of Balaam. He believed the lie so much that it ended up in his demise. So much that it stopped him. Damned. It created a dam, like a physical dam, that they may be damned. So we have damned as in going to hell, right? But think about it physically. It created a dam, in other words, a stoppage from the flow of water, from the flow of freedom, from the flow of liberty, from the flow of abundance. His hand was shut, but no, his mind was so shut, and he locked his mind up with a lie so that there was no penetration of truth. If the truth had got in, he would have been freed, liberated. He would have been made free, liberated, and able to live a beautiful life. But because he chose to shut his mind up, there was no flow, no abundance. He was locked down, all based on these very, very simple decisions, because he decided, I'm just going to go back to my familiar ways, and I'm going to find a way to make my familiar way work.
First off, I love this because this is awesome. And if I can show this, I probably can't even show this on the screen, but this was prior to me doing all the eulogies. I don't know if you can see. I took a snapshot of the Bible. You probably can't see it, but it says, "And
Send
you
it to
will
me in the
know."
text.
It says, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." That's what it said.
Mm,
You said make you free because I'm sure I was in the NLT version or something, but the KJV probably says make you free.
mhm,
And since we already dove into the labels, and I loved how you said it lies, these lies and these labels, they precede us. We come into this thing with that. It's what I call the narrative. You come into this thing with a narrative. And that's why when
mm,
we're, before our brains are developed prior to 25, a lot of us get caught up in this narrative. These labels that are put on us, these lies that are told to us. And what that creates is it creates the dam, and the brother said not letting anything in, it creates separation.
mhm,
It separates us from the truth. It's like you just separate, and then you just go deeper and deeper into it. And sometimes when you bring some of this stuff up, because people who believe in these labels often victimize themselves. They
mm,
take pity upon they want pity, right? Like that's what I see, and I'm watching it, and it's crazy because even if you bring this thing up to certain people, they'll lash out at you. How come this is the way it is, and we should be treated as such. I heard a young lady say one time, she said her grandmother told it to her. She said, "Pity and power do not reside in the same place." So you're
mm,
attempting to empower yourself through pity, and it doesn't work. You're attempting to empower yourself with these lies, and it doesn't work. It might make you feel good. There's a saying, misery loves company. So a lot of these people are in the same place. So it might make you feel good for that moment. You ever had a time? I'm curious, and if you all are watching this, if you all can comment on it. You ever had a time where you were just miserable, or something happened to you, and then you got around people and they just continue, and you got to tell your story, like your side of the story, because it ain't the truth. It's your side of the story, and for that time while you telling your side of the story, you feel better. You know what I mean? For that moment, like you just feel like I'm getting it out. And
mm,
then you got to go back by yourself. And these people who are encouraging you and empowering you with this story that you made up, these people that aren't asking you questions for you to reflect on, like, what is this about me? Because essentially you're the common denominator in your story. You are happening everywhere you go, right?
mm,
So, but these people who are like, oh, it's not your fault. It's this, it's that, it's this stimuli, it's that. These occurrences that happen. But then when you got to go back and be by yourself, and there's no one to talk to, you
mm.
fall right back into this, into like, that goodness, that good feeling of you getting it out goes away. That's why a lot of talk therapy doesn't work. If you don't have the right therapist, get yourself the right therapist. It's very important that you get a therapist that allows you to kind of make you aware of these things. But you just going to a therapist and the therapist is just telling you, or counselor is just telling you, yeah, you're right, you're right. They shouldn't have did this. They shouldn't have did that. It's always the outside as opposed from the inside looking out. But you create this through these lies and this narrative and this pity that you're seeking. You create this dam and you don't allow the truth to come in. And here's the thing: a lot of people, a lot of healthy people with healthy boundaries, most of them aren't even going to bring it up to you. You ever been around someone who just speaks all this negative stuff and I know sometimes I'm just like, yeah. And you listen, you're like, okay. And then you just looking for the quickest time to exit out of that conversation. Like, I hope somebody calls me right now. Someone call me, someone move me. I got something to go. And if you really want to empower yourself and you're on the other end, you just cut yourself out, because you listening to that story is not helping you, nor is it helping them. Because in their mind, they think that they found someone to lay this stuff on, so to speak. But opening up, but the separation, the labels, the lies, they're separating you from the truth, and you're just getting further and further. You're creating we are creating that schism, that separation from the truth and the abundance. And then where is it to be found? You mentioned, brother, you said don't lie to two people. It's funny that you said that. I was talking to one of my uncles yesterday, and he was saying there's three people. And of course, this is a joke, guys, because definitely not to yourself and not to God. But he said don't lie to your doctor, don't lie to your attorney, and don't lie to your best friend, because whenever you're in trouble, they the one that's going to help get you out of it. You know what I mean? All in all, just don't lie. Don't lie. This has been
you
awesome.
know what?
Go ahead, brother.
You know, that's along the same lines, because it's the purpose behind what he was saying is along the same lines, because it's like these are people that are designed to help you. Your number one advocate, your number one advocate on the earth should be yourself. If you're not your number one advocate, you already are trapped in your own lies. You're stuck. And there's nobody outside of the earth that can help you but God. And the thing about it is, Mike, is that when you start telling God all the truth, he starts to work things out. And when you tell yourself truth all the time, you start not wanting to lie to anybody else, because now you have something to stand for.
Yes. Integrity.
It changes who you're, right. And I love the way you were mentioning, misery loves company, which is, it's a cliche that's been around for a long time. So, and I want to use that in this sense, not to debate the true origin of it, not that we would. But the thing is that when you think about that dam and the absence of that fresh water coming in to replenish, that's why the river runs through it, is to replenish. It replenishes everything along that riverbank. As long as the water runs through, it replenishes. Even God said that his word shall not return to him void. It goes to replenish. It goes to give growth, to give life. That's the reason why you want running water. If you drink stagnant water, you will die eventually, because there's only death and things that grow in death. And those things bring death, or something that is susceptible to death. That's why we don't mess with stagnant sitting water. Not even animals will. They go to the running water, to the brook and the rivers. Even if if a lake is good to drink from, because the animals will drink from, that means that there is an undercurrent there somewhere, because they know that there is a replenishment there. They can tell it. They can sense it. They don't have brains like we do. They have instincts and they have sense. But anyway, whenever there is a dam, if a beaver puts up a dam, there's for a reason. Whenever there's a dam there, it not only stops the increase from entering, but it also stops the decrease from departing. So now when we start talking about misery loves company, well, who is there with you?
Let me tell you,
Everything. Hmm.
man. I'm getting goosebumps, man, having this conversation. I know we got to end it, because we're giving you. This is one of those videos that I'm praying my grandkids and great grandkids, if the Lord allows, gets a chance to see, because this is important. This is important. Like we got on this call or this Zoom earlier, and we got to talking about abundance. And if for those of you who haven't checked out Myron Golden, like this, the brother has a way of communicating that's amazing. So I suggest anybody who has a chance to look at Myron Golden is to put it out there, is to go check it out, because I'm gonna tell you that this abundance thing, the past couple months I just been making things like really, really simple, right? Abundance is really, really simple as well. But because we are so caught up in the old way of things, that when we are introduced to and it's all the time. These things, like you mentioned earlier, you say God is abundance. Like, you can't go over, you can't go under, you can't go around, you got to go through. This abundance is standing, it's right there, and it's just for us to take it. It's not to avoid it, it's not to resist it, it's not to challenge it, it's just to go through it, and it's as simple as that. And a
Mm,
lot of the things that we are nervous about and we're scared about, or we're fearful, all these things, avoiding the uncomfortability of it, of what we think is uncomfortability, is 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 making us stay stagnant, as you
mm,
put it, brother. Stay put, not allowing anything in, not allowing anything out, not shedding things that need to be shed when it's time to shed, not not allowing things to grow when it's time to grow. We're keeping it in this one place, and we're becoming stagnant. And we're and it's a and you mentioned it's death, right? Like, that's the true
mm.
death. This is the dying 1,000 times thing that we talk about, that's mentioned.
Thousand
It, uh,
cuts.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It's dying. It's dying. It's just we just continue going through this painful thing because we're scared the fearfulness. So avoidance is in it. And listen, guys, I'm not talking as if this is just out of theory, etc. I'm telling you that when I noticed it, I'm just like, it's just right there. It's to go through it, and not to say that I'm perfect either, because there's times when I want to retreat, or I do retreat. Like, nah, I just this is for another day, and that's okay, because you're allowed to have that feeling as a human being. I think maybe some of us think that that's not okay, and so we start to do stuff in a stiff way, in a rigid way, like, this is where the hard work and the discipline, and it's all it is. And it's not all of that. There's a lot of joyfulness in this. There's a lot of playfulness in this. There's a lot of love in this, right? There's all these great things. Happiness. We spoke about happiness last week. There's a lot of happiness in these things, but we just got to, you just not have to. You get to. We get to be a part of this abundance. So I would suggest we choose it. Any last words, brother?
Mm. I like it. Choose abundance. Just choose it. Choose abundance, and watch this show back again, because I know maybe somebody, we should name it, make room, and we should put on the thing abundance, and and people
Yeah.
come in here and they start looking for it, because this is something that you have to choose. You have to choose, not even choose. You have to make a decision.
Mm.
Decide today. It's more than choose, because people choose things all the time, but make a decision that you will live with, that you will do. That This is one of the reasons why I admire Mike so much. This is one. This is one of the reasons why I look up to. This is one of the reasons why I look up to you so much, because I will never, and I tell your story to this day, and I'll never forget working for the city, meets up with his mentor, and then he He was leaving his old job and he was going to go on this brand new pathway. And he has not, whether he looked back or not, I don't know. He might have looked back in his mind at one point in time. He already said there's been times when he decided, or when he was thinking that he wouldn't go through with it. But at the end of the day, his decision was, I'm going to keep going through. I'm going to keep going through. I'm going to keep going through. And that's where we find, see, if you want to get to the abundance using the same analogy, you have to go through the dam. There's a song that says, if you're going through hell, don't stop. It said, if you catch hell, don't hold it. And if you're going through hell, don't stop.
If you catch it, don't hold it. If you're going through, don't stop.
And so this means a lot to me, because like Mike, I understand that, especially from a spiritual perspective. And my caveat, and the thing that I'm always leaning on Mike in, is the things that he's told me. He's like, man, you are so good at this, you are so good at that. And in my mind, the lie is still there. Now, I got rid of so many lies, but there's still some that I'm right in the middle of getting rid of. Now, I'm just being truthful with y'all. I want y'all to understand this thing, because one day you're going to look back, you're going to say, he told me. And the thing is like, Mike's like, man, I got to get you up there to speak. I got to get you up there, because he sees something. He in these certain instances, he was my Eli. And he's telling me, stop coming to me. Go to him. I've been there in that situation. In my spiritual life, I got the message. It wasn't easy. I had to go through the dam. I had to go through the hell. I had built a dam, and I was not thinking I was living a good life. I realized when my eyes were open that I was living in hell, and I had damned myself. My hell was my mind, and the dam was the lies that caused my mind to not go through hell to get to the other side. So when the key to my mind was unlocked, I realized I was damned, not because God damned me, but because I damned myself. And I had to go through. I had to break the dam down until the living waters flowed through. And then I found when I was trying to swim out, I could not go against the current until it balanced. And then I just walked right on through.
Come on.
Take my yoke upon you. That's what he said. That's what the Lord said. Take my yoke, because my burden is easy. It's light. And so I realized that when you get into that space where it is difficult to pass through, and you've broken the dam down. Now, you did all that work to break that dam down, and now rushing water, because it's new life. It's coming at you so strong, you don't even know what to do with it. You have caused the disruption inside of your life. And now it feels like I'm not supposed to be here. This is harder than it was before. And that's because you were accustomed to living in hell. And it was okay. Nobody bothered you. Nobody messed with you. Why? Because you were already in hell. Everybody there was in hell. And nobody wanted to bother with you because you just as messed up as they are. So nobody's got nothing to say to you. Everybody has a poor mindset. There's nobody but now when you break through, you got people and you got person and places that are moving so fast that it's confusing. Your life has been disrupted. But if you keep on swimming like a salmon, if you just keep on going upstream, there is a better day, a better place up above our heads. Man, I tell you what, I thank you there, brother.
I'm not following that. Listen, guys, you heard it. You heard it, man. I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate each and every one of you all for checking in. I'm sure if you stuck around this long, you definitely got some value from it. Comment, engage, like, subscribe, share. We definitely appreciate those of you who are checking in now, later on, whenever, because that was a word. Other than that, man, we appreciate you all, and we will see you next week. Community Beacon. Peace.